So we'll talk about the basic non-experimental method approach, and then we'll talk about limits. So the challenges are things that make non-experimental methods difficult. The limits are things that you cannot do, even with non-experimental methods. These are limits of non-experimental methods. These are things that oftentimes cannot be overcome. So the first one, and that's why it's got that sometimes there, is that many of the things that we study using non-experimental methods are just not repeatable. And oftentimes that comes when things are case studies of somebody that went through extraordinary circumstances, when it's some sort of naturalistic event, when it's something that wasn't a thing that an experimenter could control. So for example, one of the big events that occurred, non-repeatable events that occurred, that a ton of research was done on, was the 9/11 attacks. So when this occurred, lots of behavior came out of this that was fascinating. So there was a rise in patriotism. There was a rise in the giving up of freedoms for security. There was a increase in xenophobia. There was flashbulb memories, right? So tons of studies have been done on people asking them the question, where were you when 9/11 occurred? So there's been a ton of research that's been done on 9/11, but none of it is repeatable. You can't do 9/11 again, right? Let's hope that nothing like this ever happens again. But you'll see that when we get to experimental methods, one of its powers is you can do it over and over and over again. Non-experimental methods, they're not. Some of them are not able to be done again and again. So a more recent example is all the research that's being done now on the Me Too movement. So the Me Too movement kind of burst out when Rose McGowan exposed Weinstein. And since then, there's been a ton of stuff that has occurred. So Weinstein and Spacey's careers basically were derailed. And then there's other things that occurred as well. So we talked about Aziz when we were talking about observational methods. And there's been a ton of research about what happened during the Me Too movement. A lot of social psychology research, a lot of gender psychology research, but it's only going to happen once, right? You cannot do Me Too again. You can't say, you know what, it was very interesting, some of the things that happened, but we want to test to make sure that, it'll happen again. So let's undo Me Too, and then we'll just do Me Too again, right? You can't do that. You can't unring the bell. That's a limitation for non-experimental methods sometimes. Another famous study, let's bring it to psychology. Does anybody know who this guy is? This is Phineas Gage. So Phineas Gage, so if you know who he is, you know what happened to him. He got a metal spike shot through his skull. So this is his skull, and you can see there's the hole where the spike came out, and it went in through his jaw, got his eye, that's why his eye is closed, and came out. And in case you've never seen it, there's the spike compared to his head. So he was working on a railroad and an explosion occurred and the spike got driven. And until I saw this photo, I knew about his story. I always thought it was like one of those little railroad spikes, like they put into the, they nailed the wood down with. No, that was the spike that went through his head. So does anybody remember what happened to Phineas Gage after the spike? Yep.
Didn't it cause personality changes or something?
It did. So do you remember what the changes were?
Wasn't he more hostile or like something along those lines? Like he was a nice guy and all of a sudden he's somewhat...
Exactly. Yeah, no, he became very hostile. He used to be a nice guy. He became very aggressive. He used to be very agreeable. Now all of a sudden he's very combative, right? And just his personality completely changed. And because of this work, because this occurred to him, he became a case study. Psychologists were fascinated by this. And this was one of the things that pointed to the role of the frontal cortex in inhibition control, in higher executive functioning, basically in not giving in to your initial instincts. So if somebody's ever done something to you and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to yell at them so much, and then you're like, you know what, better not. I want to preserve this friendship. That's your frontal cortex kicking in and saying, think about it. So his frontal cortex was damaged, and that led to conclusions about what your frontal cortex is actually for. However, we couldn't be sure just from what happened to Phineas Gage that that's what it was all about, because it might have been due to his damage that he got from the railroad spike, but it also could have been due to other things. So we have no way of knowing what it was exactly that caused that change. Because it could have been the metal spike went through his head, his cortex was damaged, that caused his change. Or maybe that morning before he went to work, he found out that his girlfriend was cheating on him. And he's like, oh no, my girlfriend was cheating on me. I was such a nice guy and I can't believe she did this to me. And then he finds out that not only is she cheating on him, but she's cheating on him with his best friend. And he's like, oh no, this is horrible. I was so good to my best friend and now he's cheating on me with my girlfriend. And not only that, but his dog left him. And he's like, oh no, my dog left me. I can't believe it. And not only did his dog leave him, but his dog left him for his neighbor. And he looks over at the neighbor and he's like, oh no, you took my dog. I can't believe it. I was so nice to my dog. I was so nice to my neighbor. You know what? No more Mr. Nice Guy. No more nice Phineas Gage. From now on, it's just going to be all about me. I'm looking out for number one. This is such a traumatic experience. I'm going to change my life. I'm not going to be a pushover anymore. Maybe that's what caused his personality change and not the spike at all. Right? Maybe it was just a coincidence that was the morning and he was just angry, packing that dynamite, going, oh, I can't believe these people, Maybe that's what has occurred. How could we tell? Well, we could tell this if we could repeat this event. So if we could go to other people and spike them in the brain and measure their behavioral changes, then we could determine if it actually was the damage to the frontal cortex that caused the personality change. But clearly we're not going to do that. So that's a limit of these non-experimental methods. Oftentimes they're just not repeatable. And in these situations is usually when they're not repeatable. So you can't repeat a case study like Phineas Gage. You can't redo 9/11 or redo the Me Too movement. So, and this is an issue because experimental science, getting to the truth, oftentimes requires replication. Oftentimes it requires that you do something and then you do it again, just to make sure that it wasn't a fluke personality change. It's a real personality change. So that's one of the big limits, that you just can't redo them over and over and over again. All right, any questions on the replication portion? All right. So the last thing we're going to end up with, we're not going to end up with time for the whole thing. We'll leave it as a thought experiment. We'll pick this up on our next class. The last limit of non-experimental methods, and this is one that is very important to keep in mind, because it's one that is easy to overlook. It's one that your brain is pre-programmed to overlook, and that has to do with causation. So because you don't manipulate the conditions in non-experimental methods, right? That's literally the non-part. Do not manipulate the conditions. Because you can't manipulate the conditions, you can't manipulate the potential causes. If you can't manipulate the potential causes, you don't know if that's what actually caused the effect. So because of this, and you've heard this probably before, correlation does not imply causation. Because of this, you can never, from non-experimental methods, be sure about the direction of cause and effect. And as a psychologist, this is exactly what we want to know. What is the direction of cause and effect? Because we oftentimes want to manipulate a cause in order to get a certain effect. That's part of what psychological treatment is all about. So I'll give you a kind of classic, ludicrous example of a correlation that has been observed. So this is not made up. This is for real. You can check the data if you so desire. But it has been found that ice cream consumption is positively correlated to shark attacks. So what I mean by this is that when ice cream consumption is high, shark attacks increase. When ice cream consumption is low, there are fewer shark attacks. So as ice cream consumption goes up, so too do the number of people attacked by sharks. As ice cream consumption goes down, so too do the number of people attacked by sharks. So what does this mean? Because those two variables have a relationship. You can show that, you can find it. Does this mean that eating ice cream makes you delicious and irresistible to sharks? So that if you eat a lot of ice cream, the sharks are going to be like, ooh, somebody's been eating ice cream. And that's why the shark attacks go up. That's possible, all right? It's a possible reason why these two variables go together. It's also possible that shark attacks cause ice cream consumption. So maybe when somebody hears the news reports about a shark attack, they read the report in the newspaper and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they got attacked by a shark. That makes me feel so sad. They get the Ben and Jerry's and then they just, self-medicate with ice cream. Maybe that's what's going on here as well. It's possible. The last possibility is that there's any number of third variables that could be causing both of these effects. So does anybody know what third variable is the most plausible one for this? This is also known as the third variable problem. But does anybody have an idea what's the third variable that's causing both? Yep.
Summertime.
It's the summertime. Exactly, yeah. So a number of you had that idea. So when it's summertime, it's hot, more people eat ice cream. When it's summertime, it's hot, more people go to the beach. That's where the sharks are, they're at the beach. So when it's cold, less ice cream. When it's cold, less beach time, less shark attacks. So the two of them go together. They vary together, right? They have a positive relationship, but they have no causal connection whatsoever. And that's the danger when you see two variables that have a relationship. Your mind immediately goes to causation, and it's very important to train that out of us.